Welcome to Grow Good, a place to spread joy, beauty, and goodness, to bear good fruit, a place where others can meet or be inspired to meet God. So get cozy, lean in, and listen close. Miracles are at work, and He wants to meet you too. Hello, friends, and happy Tuesday. I am so excited to bring to you the story of Mariana of Big Apple Catholic this week. It is such a fruitful conversation. It's so inspiring, and I just wanted to listen to her all day. She shares really openly, just and vulnerably about her experiences and what she's been through in her life and what has led her to where she is today. So I'm so excited to be able to share it with you all. Please enjoy. Without any further ado, here's Mariana. Mariana, hello. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm pumped to be here.
Can you start out by introducing yourself and just telling us a little bit about you and what your life is like right now?
Yeah, so my name is Mariana. You can call me Mari, either one. I'm about to graduate from the King's College in New York City in business and on to be a full-time focused missionary in just a few coming weeks. So, was a New York City gal for some time, still quarantined in Alabama now. And then off to, I don't know where I'm going yet, but off to be a missionary, wherever the Lord wants me to be. Yeah.
Oh, that's so exciting. You're like right in this point where you're going to get to have this huge adventure. And you already probably have to this point, but it's like, that must be so exciting. Just waiting though. The wait must be like, come on, I just want to go.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So can you walk us through your journey in the faith? If you don't mind, just starting out, maybe giving some background, like how you grew up, if you were always Catholic, or what your relationship with God was like from a young age.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I grew up in a Latino Catholic family. For those of you who might be familiar with Latinos, we know our rosaries and we know our novenas and our mass. We go every Sunday. And so I grew up and being Catholic was very much my thing. It was like the thing my friends knew me for. I wouldn't say that I didn't have a relationship. I'd say it's more like a roller coaster of like, when I was down, I knew the Lord was going to help me. And he was going to rescue me, but it never quite necessarily caused me to transform any way that I was living. And so while being Catholic was my thing and I loved, being in youth group, I never really allow it to change me. But I definitely grew up, Catholic, went to every conference, taught First Communion for 2 years.
Wow.
And definitely like had my family encourage me, even when I didn't want to go to mass, because that's what we did as a family growing up. Mm-hmm.
Nice. And so did you have a moment where you can remember where you kind of started to realize, he was there and he wanted to actually have a relationship with you?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I think he tried to tell me probably several times and I never wanted to hear it. So when I went to college, my parents were like, you're going to New York City. This is crazy. What are you going to do about your faith? And I was like, I'll be fine. I got it. But eventually, after my freshman year, I ended up just very passively stepping away from the faith. I'll sleep in this Sunday, and then the next, and then the next. And before I knew it, I hadn't gone to mass for 6 months. And I knew something was wrong. And so I really entered into the depths of darkness after my freshman year of college. Right when I lost my faith or walked away, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And so it was like this storm, and I was really sick as well. And just hit, what they call rock bottom. And I just kind of cried out. Like, I was like, okay, something must be real, and I was like, okay, well, out of all the religions in the world, which one? Okay, Christianity. Okay, great. Out of Christianity, which ones? And something still stirred in my heart about Catholicism. And it was a several months walk sort of back to what the church was about and what they taught about who God was.
Mm.
But there's a moment, I would say my sophomore year during the Triduum, Easter Vigil, everybody's getting confirmed. And I remember so vividly that I was thinking, I'm not up on the altar getting confirmed, but I might as well have been, because the day before, the Lord just spoke so clearly into my heart on Good Friday, telling me, I'm your father. Like, not only am I your God, but I'm your father. I'm your dad. And I love you. And of course, when you hear that, for those of you who know what that's like, it totally breaks you and shakes you. And so that was really a time during my sophomore year that I realized that, yeah, he was good, and he was a father to me, and Jesus had died on a cross. Like, that's crazy. And yeah, keep in mind, I like taught first communion and everything.
Yeah.
And that was like the first step into this massive, kind of diving deep into my heart, into my wounds. I had big father wounds in my heart. But yeah, at that moment of, right, he's real, he's good, and he knows me, and he loves me, was huge.
So what led you to go from kind of sleeping in, I guess, on Sundays, to going to that mass on Good Friday where you had that moment? Was it kind of just like I'm just going to try this, and that's when you had that moment? Or had you kind of been seeking for a little bit before, leading up to that?
Yeah, I'd certainly been seeking a couple of months before that. I used to work on Sundays, praise the Lord. My store closed that I worked at, and so I was like wrecked, but it was the biggest blessing because it meant I could go to Sunday mass. And so earlier that semester, I started going. I felt weird, like, I don't know if any of you have ever walked back into a Catholic church. It's like, oh, it's home, but not home. And so I've definitely been searching and asking all the questions. I was very lucky. I had one of my good friends named Aggie. She kept bringing me back to the church every Sunday. She was in the choir. And she'd just say, hey, come watch me sing. And so I would. And I had a lot of questions. I was definitely seeking. And I wasn't afraid to ask, which I think was key. He didn't let me, I think so often I thought I couldn't ask questions, because like God would be angry at me. I was reading a lot. I was reading Christopher West's Theology of the Body, which was a huge part of my conversion. And it finally led to that moment on Good Friday and the Easter Vigil of just him opening my heart, breaking it open, and showing me his grace.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah. It's so funny. A lot of these stories I'm finding is a lot of them are after a heartbreak or a disappointment or a loss. So I just think it's very interesting how I think as humans, sometimes it's like when we're most vulnerable is when we're, our pride maybe kind of goes away, and we're more like apt to be like, what is it that's out there? What am I missing? Because I just need something more than what this life is offering me right now. And I've just found that to be a really interesting pattern in all of this, is that it's just that whole redemption story, right? Like, in the brokenness is when so many have found him. And it's just beautiful. Just when you were talking, that's what made me think of. But so then from that moment after on Good Friday, what happened next? What did you do? Were you crying in the pew, or?
Yeah, I was sobbing, and it was just such a special moment because, while our faith isn't feelings, he does speak to us in consolation. And it was a huge moment of consolation, where I just felt his presence was real. And of course, like, it's kind of like when, you get like a new workout routine, you're like, I'm going to go all in. And then like you burn out because you have to kind of pace yourself, even with like our walk with our Lord. And so to be completely transparent, like, I went home that summer and I like hardly went to mass.
Wow.
I read some books. I remember reading Rediscover Catholicism, which was great. by Matthew Kelly. Great book. And so I was reading that, but I worked at a church. And there was still this tension of like, okay, I know what my life is like in New York City. I know that I encountered him there, but that hadn't, necessarily been transmitted into my other parts of my life. Right.
Right.
Praise be to God. I moved back to New York in August, and that's where things really got going because I was back, at St. Joseph's, which was where Good Friday happened for me. And I remember Father Mike Schmitz. He was one of the podcasts I listened to. I didn't have anybody, but I had Father Mike, and I didn't know
yes
or anything like that, which was so funny. And I'd been going every Sunday to mass by myself, then journaling at a little coffee shop next door every Sunday.
That's a great idea.
It's wonderful. Oh my gosh, I call it like my little date spot with the Lord.
Yeah.
Coffee in Greenwich Village. And there was one particular day in October where, Father Mike said, don't think about like what you can do tomorrow or even next week in terms of like your relationship with the Lord. And he said, what can you do today? And I was like, oh, shoot. I think I can go to mass, to daily mass. And that's where things really took a turn because I started going to daily mass and, delving deeper into the sacraments, into who Jesus was in the Eucharist. And, that eventually, to get ahead of myself, I accidentally ran into a missionary, did not know what or who missionaries were.
Accidentally, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, totally, just by chance. Yeah, as if the Lord hadn't planned that from like all of eternity. And it was so funny. You mentioned the darkness. That very day that I ran into the missionary, I'd hit rock bottom again in a lot of ways, with a lot of my wounds I was wrestling with. And I asked for a miracle, or I actually kind of demanded for one, I don't know that I'd recommend that, but I was so desperate. I said, Lord, you're going to give me a miracle today. And sure enough, I didn't know it then, but I ran into a missionary who invited me to come to the Catholic Center at NYU that night. And I did. And, my life changed that day. But it was also changing before that, meeting Christ in the Eucharist every day. I didn't really know, what to do during adoration. I would be like, okay, are people journaling? Are they sleeping? What are they doing? But meeting mercy, just like, and being really honest. I think back after Good Friday, I wasn't necessarily honest with myself of like, what am I willing to do? Am I willing to make the time? I'm a full-time student, I'm working 35 hours a week. Can I make the time to be with the Lord, especially in the Mass? And the answer that day, forget the next week or the next day, that day it was yes. And it changed my life. I mean, it just changed the trajectory of my entire life.
Oh, gosh, that's so amazing. That's so good. And so similar for me too. Yeah, daily mass has played a huge role in mine too lately. And just how I feel like it does so many things that we can't even see or understand, I feel like. But when we make that commitment for him, he'll come in and take care of so much around you and in your heart, and just softening your heart and opening doors and leading you gently where you need to go. So that's incredible. I love that you met the missionary that day when you asked for that. Oh, it's so good. But so when you moved to the city, had you already started Big Apple Catholic, or when did you start that account?
Yeah. So I only started it about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
It's kind of crazy. Yeah. So I was a junior in college. It was right after Advent, I remember. And I just wanted to make it. I've never drawn, it's just kind of funny. People are like, what do you mean? I just made it to kind of share my thoughts and, to say you can be Catholic in New York City. And so I started it right before going to Seek, which was the first Focus conference I'd ever gone to. And just kind of jumped in, no idea what I was doing. And yeah, it's just turned into this, big, I don't even know what to call it.
I love it. It's so
really great.
inspiring and beautiful. And it's just so cool because you're right. It's like, I feel like from the world standpoint, living in New York, there's no Catholics in New York. That's what you would think. And
Yeah.
then, so I love that you made that account. When I found it, I was like, oh, that's so intriguing. Like, I want to hear about what her life is like in New York as a Catholic, because it's probably, totally different than what other people might be experiencing. But so when in the timeline was that?
Oh my. So that was just a couple of months after meeting the missionaries. And,
Okay.
right after I met everybody there at the Catholic Center, I just dove right in. I was there every day, joined Bible study. And I kind of joke with them of like, I met Catholic people, right? Who were like super devout, but also like super removed from the world. And then I met people who were like really into the world, kind of Catholic, but like nothing in between, nobody that I could like be like, wow, yeah, I just went to confession. It was great. And also, by the way, did you listen to Ariana Grande? Like I couldn't have that same conversation. And here were these people who I could and who loved the Lord profoundly, And so, yeah, after a couple of months of just doing life with them, sacramentally, just everyday life, I just wanted to start that account. And, I didn't know I was going to be moving out of New York City. Eventually, that was my whole dream, was to stay there forever till I died. But yeah, it really came a couple of months after getting involved with the Catholic Center and just having my heart kind of stirred in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how you say heart being stirred, because that's exactly it. It's like a desire. Your desires change. Like, it's like things that you used to want to do, they're just not as interesting anymore. It's like all you want to do is like spend time with the Lord or spend time talking about him. Like, now I'm like, can someone just bring up like Jesus so I can talk about it? But I love it because that's exactly, we're literally made for it, and we're made for community. So naturally, like when you have this love and you're experiencing this, it naturally just like wants to come out of you. You're like, I need to talk to someone about this right now. So I love that he gave you community in the city, and just continued to kind of like work on your heart and your soul to get you to the point of saying yes to being a missionary, which is crazy. So how did that come about? Was it just like talking with the missionaries and spending time with them? Do you mind just sharing like your journey to saying that yes?
Yeah, of course. It's one of my favorite stories to tell. So I already told the first part, just kind of like by providence running into one of the missionaries. And I love that they challenged me. That was one of my favorite things about them. Especially my dear friend Trish. She's what my discipler. So what, in focus terms is like kind of like my mentor, but also one of my best friends. And she challenged me and loved me tremendously. And, just in December, it's so funny. I get in the same chapel. I was praying about my internships for the next semester, because for me, whatever internship I chose was really going to set me on a path for my career. So I was praying about my internships. Focus was nowhere on my mind. And I was like, okay, Lord, what internship is best? And I just remember I was like, did I take Benadryl? Because all of a sudden I had this like wave of peace come over me. I was like, what is going on? And just hearing him ask, like, have you considered focus? And I was like, wait, Lord, like, we're not talking about that here.
Wait, what? No.
I'm still a junior, like, this is not what I'm talking about here. But, I heard him so clearly. And I'm a very dramatic, emotional, and I expected myself to have this big, like, yes, I'll do it for you. But no, honestly, I was just like, okay, and that was like when he planted that desire in me. I ended up going to Indonesia with Focus over a year ago in July. And, that really refined even more my desire to be a missionary, to apply in August. I applied. That was crazy because it had been on my mind for so long.
Mm.
Went to interview weekend. So you have this whole weekend where you're praying and interviewing. And that was really when I knew how badly I wanted it. Because I don't know about you, but I've had moments where, I want something so bad it hurts. And people will ask you, like, how do you feel about it? And you're like, oh no, like it's totally fine if I don't get it. Like I'll get over it. But that just wasn't true of me. I wasn't being honest of like, actually, this hurts really bad. I really want it. Eventually I got an offer, and it was the greatest yes I've ever said, because it was my way of giving back to the Lord of like, you've loved me through these authentic friendships. That, we were talking about how it just overflows. These people have encountered Jesus by the way they talk, by the way they treat you, by the way they love you. And here he was like presenting me with an opportunity to give that back by being a missionary. So, and again, and it was so funny because I think maybe to my friends who, aren't Catholic or something, it might look like I'm giving up my dreams of being in New York City. I was on a pretty good trajectory to like be pretty well established in New York. And yeah, to the outside, it looks like I'm giving everything up, this like crazy life in New York City. And yet, gosh, it just fulfilled the desires of my heart that I'd have since I was a little girl, to be his missionary, and specifically through Focus. So, got a little bit of a taste, oh my gosh, like 1/1,000,000th of what Our Lady must have experienced at the Annunciation. But to say that yes, and it was so easy, when you know him.
I totally know what you mean with that desire that it hurts, or like, and now what I'm experiencing too is like, it's like an urgency. Like it's like you have to do it. Like you just have to do it. Like I just don't know how else. And that's how it got like with this. Like I had been putting it off kind of for so long. Not putting it off, but just like dragging my feet, I guess. Like you were saying, like, you're just thinking about it, and then things are being put in your path and you're like, I don't know. And then it literally got to the point where it's just like, nope. Okay, you have to do it right now. To the point where it would like bother me if I wasn't doing it. So yeah, I totally know what you mean by that. That's amazing though. That it's where you're meant to be too, which is such a great feeling of just like, and that peace that you have, like you were saying, I'm sure for other people, they can't really understand, but your heart has been changed, and you can't go back to what it was before because it's just different now. I've encountered him, and he's communicated with me and given me this desire. And I love the way you described that, and that's why something with the imagery in scripture with seeds and growing, because I just feel like that's so similar to how he works. Like it's like you were saying, like you were in that prayer, not even on your mind. And then it just grew so much to the point where you were like, I have to have this. And if I don't get it, I'm going to be crushed, and it's like, wow, that the fact that even happened was totally the Lord at work in you. So thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. So why did you, I don't know if I asked this, but why did you move to New York City in the first place?
Yeah, I was chasing down that dream. I've always loved New York City since I was like 8. We went up there a lot as a family, and so I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. Pretty like homogenous town, which is great in a lot of ways, But for me, I just wanted something different. I love the arts. I was a photographer for a while, and so I moved to New York City because I wanted to live that, still like virtuous, I was never necessarily like a partier or anything like that, in that sense of like crazy New York City life, but I certainly wanted the fame. Oh my word. So if we're being real honest, I moved to New York City.
Hey, it's like St. Ignatius, right? Like he wanted to be like this like huge knight, like, yeah.
Yeah, I get it. Oh my gosh, I totally get it. But New York City, for anybody that's lived there or in a big city like Boston or something like that, it'll chew you up and spit you out many times and humble you. because it's a big city. But we were talking earlier, God's grace is there. I had a sister Lucia of the Sisters of Life, tell me, accidentally ran into the sisters when I was visiting for college. And I told her, I said, "Sister, I'm going to be real. Watch out. I'm going to be real. I'm kind of scared to move here." And she told me, I didn't know what at the time was St. Paul's words, but she said, where sin abounds, God's grace abounds even more. And that really gave me the security to move to New York. I was still looking, to be seen, to be known, and to be loved, right? So it's what's at the base of our hearts, but just seeking it, maybe not in the right ways. But he used that, he used that to lead me to kind of like lowercase vocation, what's on my next path. So it's incredible. Yeah, he uses all that we have, even if it's like wanting to be super famous in New York City.
Yes. Oh, I love how you put that. It's just it's great. And I feel like it's so inspiring. It's like God's grace. Exactly. Sometimes we limit him, it's like, oh, he's everywhere but here. But it's like, no, he's everywhere, and he's working in everything all the time. So that's an amazing story. Again, a chance encounter. Wow.
I love them, the Sisters of Life.
Yeah, they're amazing. So how has he since played a role in your life? Clearly a huge role, but what have been maybe some of your biggest challenges in cultivating your relationship and some of your greatest joys, would you say?
Yeah, when I was talking about earlier of I kind of knew the Lord, but I didn't let him transform me. I think that was one of the biggest challenges, is to look at my life and to look at the wounds that I had. Most of them, just come from childhood wounds. I think most of us have those, and they really inhibit how we look at the world, right? So I just had fatherly wounds. My dad is a great father, but unfortunately he wrestled with alcoholism, which, for those of you who, know somebody like that or grew up like that, it really takes a toll on you and how you look at your parents, how you look at yourself. And so that was an area of my life that I was like, I'm not touching that. I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. And I sure as heck am not going to let the Lord touch that. But it was in that wound, it was in that deepest wound that I had, that he just started transforming my heart, which is it's not glamorous. I think often we tend to think that following the Lord is going to be this kind of feel good emotional experience, but actually it's turning interiorly and looking at your heart and being honest. So that was the most challenging thing, because I had a lot of wounds, like we all do, just as a product of the fall, and ways that I operated, just seeking validation, seeking validation from anybody who had eyes. I wanted it. And entering into those spaces, which were really dark sometimes. But not to enter it alone, entering it with the Lord or with somebody that you trust. That was hard, but that's where the greatest joys came from, because I think we're enslaved by our sin. I think we all know this, and to be set free from some of that is incredible. Like I said, I just was always seeking validation in whatever way I could find it. And to finally know that I was beloved by the Lord, that I didn't have to look into anybody's eyes to find my worth. That was one of the greatest joys that I've ever had in my life, and continue, to have. Of course there's challenges, right? So in quarantine, you're alone, you're lonely, like you want to feel seen and known. And of course we're tempted to, to do things that make us feel that way. But truly to look at our, our sinfulness, our wounds, our interior life, and to let the Lord transform that, but also just to let him enter, because I didn't think he wanted to enter into what was my most shameful part. But that's where I saw him, that's where his glory, like St. Augustine says, in my deepest wound, I saw your glory and it dazzled me. His blueprint is very much palpable in that way of he wants us in our deepest wounds, to heal us and to bring us back home to him.
Yes. It's similar. in my story too. I mean, one that comes to mind is I just had so many wounds with women. Like I just think, I don't even know. Nobody ever told me that. I just internalized a lot, I think. And I never really was taught the power that Mary has and just like how amazing she is and how amazing the feminine genius is and all of these things that I had never been told or taught. And that was such a wound for a long time. And it's amazing because that's exactly what you were saying. That's exactly where he came first. And that's how I first started to open doors was, and I said it, I actually interviewed the Catholic feminist, Claire. I love her so much.
It's awesome.
And she's going to be on the show, which was this huge thing for me because that was the first thing. Like I literally at one point, I just Googled like Catholicism and feminism, like in one search. Cause I'm like,
I've been there. I've definitely been there.
I was like, can these, yeah. From there, it was like a floodgate of just like grace and just like him leading me down a path of healing that wound. But it's just interesting how exactly like you're saying, sometimes it's like our greatest wounds are he wants to heal and then restore. And then now I have such a passion for sharing that. Yes. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, yeah. Because I want to help people that have that same wound. You know, it's like, let me show you, you know, what he can do. So yeah, it's amazing how he doesn't only just heal, he then like makes new and wants to create new life out of it too, which is just so beautiful. But so what have been some of your standout influences on your journey? I know you mentioned a couple books, but if you have like books, podcasts, a certain speaker or retreats, or even a specific sacrament that you really feel like stood out on your journey so far?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's a great question. That's probably the question that I had the hardest time with. Father Mike was great for me. For several months, I didn't know any Catholics and I didn't know any Catholic priest. And yet I had this Catholic priest who like somehow understood me. I felt like he could just see into my heart. So I'd listen to him all the time at the beginning of kind of my walk with the Lord. I love Abiding Together.
So
those
good.
three ladies also just look right into my heart and are able to see me. The sacrament of confession, huge. I was always scared of it. And I would never have an honest confession, like I'd either make up things on the spot because I'd get nervous. And at Seek, my first conference, that was when I had my first honest confession. And, even when I say it now, confession, there's kind of this
yeah, I hate the word.
That's not what I'm trying to communicate, because I know the stigma that's around it. But I gave the Lord in that moment what was, my deepest sin, and I, it's kind of funny. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but somebody in a talk will be like, the Lord loves you, even in your sinfulness. And I'm like, no. Like, but if you only knew, I am the exception to the rule. My mistake. And I brought it to confession during Seek, and man, did he meet me in mercy. I had the priest teared up, and he looked me in the eyes and he says, you were looking for people's validation again in other people's eyes, and someone wounded you because of it. You weren't maliciously seeking to sin, or to betray the Lord, is that I told him. And he told me, oh my gosh, it brings tears to my eyes. He said, when the Lord looks at you, it's like the baptism of our Lord, where he says, this is my beloved daughter in whom I am well pleased. And to hear that when you've just told this like stranger, you're like deepest, darkest secrets is the greatest amount of grace. And I've loved confession ever since. It's a place where I can come bear it all. Priests are never going to be shocked, and our Lord sure as heck isn't. So I've loved confession. Oh my word, adoration. I
Yes.
know that not everybody has access to it, unfortunately, especially not now. But making a holy hour, especially with the sacrament, is incredible. Books, I've read so many books. I can't can't think. I'd say, Theology of the Body, Intro to Theology. Oh my word, Theology of the Body by Christopher West. For those, anybody that struggles with sexual sin, or honestly for anybody really that's breathing, it's so good to look at our desires and to say, hey, they're good. They just might be misdirected. That was really healing for me. Be Healed by Dr. Bob Schuchts. Huge moment in my life too. Obviously,
I don't know
healing
that
is
one. Which one's that?
oh my gosh, yeah,
I don't know.
you have to read it. I think Sister Miriam recommended it. I think that was her number one book of just healing, and how the Lord, He healed on earth not for the sake of healing, but to reveal how He wants to know us personally. And that's again. So Be Healed by Dr. Bob Schuchts. He runs the JP2, I think, Healing Center in Florida.
Wow.
Incredible. Would highly recommend. And one more book that I've loved is 33 Days to Merciful Love. So Father Michael Gately, who also wrote 33 Days to Morning Glory, did a consecration to Divine Mercy. And that's been great. Oh, okay. One more book. Well, I never liked to read. I never liked to read until I met the Lord.
Me too. I literally just said that the other day. That's so funny.
It's incredible. I'm glad you understand, because when people ask me this question, I'm like, oh, so many. But Father Jacques Philippe, I don't know if you've read any of his books. They're teeny tiny, but oh my gosh, powerful. I think my favorite's Hear Your Freedom. Over mission. And yeah, just how much freedom we have in anything that comes in our way. We choose it, and the Lord chose His passion. He wasn't forced into it, and so we choose our sufferings today, and that gives us freedom. So that was a lot, but a lot of podcasts.
Good though. Oh, so good. So good. I'm definitely going to check out Father Jacques Philippe. Keeps coming up, and I need to, I'm actually doing my first consecration to Mary right now, 33 Days to Morning Glory. Yeah, it's been amazing so far. And I'm finishing on Our Lady of Fatima. So I'm really excited.
Yes, May 13th.
Yeah, very soon. Very soon. I'm very excited. It's been an awesome journey so far. And yeah, it's been like dominoes. It's like once it starts, it's just like, oh my gosh. Then I was going to daily mass. Then I was going to adoration. Now I'm doing a consecration. I'm like, what is happening? But I love it. I love it. It's great. Those are all amazing. So where can we go to find you and Big Apple Catholic, and just to follow your journey as a missionary? Where could someone go to find more about you online?
Yeah, right now I think Instagram is my home. I post on there, pretty frequently. What I post is 10 times out of 10, where I'm at in my journey. So spiritually, I've been thinking about, other sort of forms of media to enter into, praying about it. So we'll see in the coming months, but as of right now, Instagram, it's Big Apple Catholic. It's going to stay that way.
Okay, good. I was going to ask, I was like, are you changing it? I don't know. We might have to update this later.
No, I think it's kind of a fun opportunity to be like, actually, yeah, I did think I was going to be a Big Apple Catholic for the rest of my life. And then the Lord said, nope.
Hey, who knows? You never know. You might be back. So,
that's what people keep saying.
You never know.
Who knows?
But who knows where He's going to bring you next?
I know He could, man. The Lord just brings you on the craziest journey. So truly, who knows?
Yeah. So the last question I'm hoping to ask everyone who comes on is, can you share with us one scripture verse that's either speaking to you right now or that played a foundational role in your journey, and why?
Man, great question. I have so many. Scripture has been a huge part of this whole conversion too, I think the first one that comes to mind is the Annunciation. And when I was praying with this in Indonesia, I was alone. I was like this like random girl. And I was reading the Annunciation, and the angel says, like, Mary, like the Lord is with you. And that part just kept sticking out to me because I was like, imagine if an angel came and told me that the Lord was with me. Like, forget everything else of the Annunciation, just that he was with me, what that would do in my life. And I very much, again, a stirring of the heart of like the Lord was telling me, like, here's this random girl in Indonesia, like barefoot in this chapel. But he was telling me like Mariana, I'm here with you. The Lord is with you. And that's been carrying me through this period of quarantine too, of like, you can feel so alone in your room or wherever you might be. But to know like, no, the Lord is with you, even in this like random town, what feels like the middle of nowhere, living a very, very average life. The Lord is with you. And that's true, of whoever's hearing this, that wherever you're at, the Lord is with you, just as he was with Our Lady, and it just takes a yes, a fiat on our part on the daily to be able to see him. So I love the Annunciation.
It's really
one of my
good.
favorite.
That's really beautiful. I love that. And I'm definitely going to sit with that for a while. That's good.
That's good. Oh, she'll carry you through, especially Our Lady of Fatima. She is faithful. She's faithful.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful story of how it all started. It was a total divine providence how it all started too. So it's going to be good when those things happen. You're just like, oh man, I'm meant to do this. Okay, I'm going to do it. So it's exciting. And yeah, I love that Mary and the Annunciation is your scripture, because she, I've definitely just now, cultivating such a good relationship with her, and her bringing me, getting to know her son, in kind of a different way, because I feel like I have come to know the Lord and I pray so well with Jesus. And so it's been really, really beautiful just to see like kind of this other side of, his mother and her relationship to her son, and just how, she can bring us to him. So I love that, reflecting on the Annunciation like that. That was beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Of course.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I feel so inspired. It's just incredible just to listen to what he's done for you and in your life, and how, you went from this girl moving to New York for the glitz and the glam, and now you're coming out like a focused missionary, and you're going to go move to, who knows where next. But it's so exciting, and it's such an inspiring story. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, Rachel. I'm so excited to be even just like a small part, of your story, and to hear other people's stories. I'm so pumped to just.
Me too. I can't wait. All right. Thank you, Mariana. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for growing some good with us today. Visit us at togrowgood.com/podcast to find links to everything we mentioned in our conversation. Find us on Instagram at togrowgood. See you next week.